Okay, I think we can get started. It's tough to recommend films when it comes to King Lear, but I just saw the one with Ian McKellen that's directed by Trevor Nunn, and it's quite good, and overall the one I'd recommend most. Uh, you get to see Gandalf as King Lear, and he's really quite good. I don't agree with everything he does or everything in the productions directed by Trevor Nunn, but it's lightly cut, but that's the one I would recommend. Okay, so today we come to King Lear finally, the greatest of Shakespeare's plays, and therefore the greatest single product of the human imagination. One has to go to something like Bach's St. Matthew Passion or Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel even to come close, but King Lear is it. If we want to send something into outer space to represent our planet, we should send out copies of King Lear, although maybe they can just watch Ian McKellen. So let's just back up a bit here, see where we're coming from. We spent an unusual amount of time on comedies for a course on Shakespeare's politics. Did Midsummer Night's Dream, As You Like It, and Twelfth Night. I did think was an interesting way of showing that politics raises interesting questions throughout Shakespeare's works, even in the comedies, and the comedies have something to teach us about politics. They are, in their own way, very interesting explorations of the relation of individuals to the community and to the political community. And they deal with the question of whether people can stand independent of the political community. One of the issues we're going to be dealing with deeply in King Lear is the political community and the cosmos, are they coextensive? The political community and the cosmos. That is, political life's very important for Shakespeare. It involves a lot, but does it involve everything? Does it encompass everything? Are there experiences that go beyond the political? And Shakespeare shows that in the comedies when he explores eros, and explores love. Now, love is part of the community. It's what brings people together. Eros is a uniting force, but it also sets them apart. We saw that tragically in Romeo and Juliet, that their love gave them a vision very separate from that of the rest of Verona and put them at odds with it. Now, in the comedies, we see that as a source of complication, that the lovers in the comedies start going off into a dream world, into a night world. But that's very confusing for them. And ultimately, as we particularly saw in Midsummer Night's Dream, but in all three of the comedies, the lovers choose to come back into the daylight world of the city. They actually won't take the Romeo and Juliet course. And indeed, in the comedies, Shakespeare's dealing with the ordinary run of humanity. And I think one of the things he shows about the ordinary run of humanity is that most people don't want to go it alone, especially not in that radical sense that Romeo and Juliet do. A course of going alone that leaves them dead at the end of the play. Most people want the support of the community. They actually feel uncomfortable when they're seeing things differently from everybody else. And that's the force of conventions that we saw in the comedies. Conventions seem at first to be the opponent of love, to threaten to make it sterile and unproductive. But once things get shaken up in the comedies, and conventions get revitalized, they actually supply something important to the lovers, a way of stabilizing their emotions. That's what marriage means. It's getting the support of the community to validate your love. And that's what makes for these happy endings in the comedies, that they do bring people together. It's another way of expressing what I think is fundamental to Shakespeare, the idea that the state of nature for human beings is civilization, that they fulfill themselves in community. Now, that requires in the comedies suspending a lot of the tensions and problems that normally drive people apart. So the comedies, to some extent, are artificial. They give us an image of cooperation and of harmony that I think Shakespeare feels will help guide us in our lives, but must be understood ultimately as artificial. Hence, a very interesting moment on page 68 of Twelfth Night. You can look it up. It's Act 3, Scene 4. about line 132, Fabian, in the middle of one of these crazy things going on having to do with Malvolio making a fool of himself, says, "If this were played upon a stage now, I could condemn it as an improbable fiction." Now, that's an extraordinarily postmodern moment in Shakespeare, and there are actually many of them where he's quite self-conscious about his drama and reminding us we're just seeing a play. That indeed this is being played upon a stage, and reminding us this comedy is improbable fiction. Life doesn't always work out this way. That's why Shakespeare often introduces what I've been calling tragic relief in his comedies, on the analogy of the comic relief in his tragedies, that he very often reminds us, particularly at the endings, that the comic resolution is not all-inclusive. And so even in this reforming community where everyone's going to be in harmony, there's always a discordant note. There's a Jacus who runs off. There's a Malvolio who runs off. It is interesting that Shakespeare often associates that with some kind of religious vision which transcends the normal political community. But in the case of Twelfth Night, he ends the play with this quite remarkable song from the Clown. It's on pages 103 to 104. It's really interesting to compare this to Jacus's 7 Ages of Man speech. I don't have time to do that, but briefly, Jacus's 7 Ages of Man speech is bitter. This speech, this song of the Clown is bittersweet. Unlike Jacus, the Clown seems reconciled to the suffering involved in human life. And although he implies that there's some nasty things that happen, he's willing to accept them in the spirit of comedy. And the refrain is, "For the rain it raineth every day." That is Shakespeare reminding us that in this sunny world of comedy that he's created, there are clouds on the horizon, and life isn't going to be all happiness, contentment, and a harmonious community. Now, it's fascinating that a variant of this song appears in King Lear. It's on page 72 of your editions, so that makes it Act 3, Scene 2, about line 73, where the fool sings, "He that has in a little tiny wit, with hey-ho, the wind and the rain, must make content with his fortunes fit, though the rain it raineth every day." Shakespeare likes to make these kind of links between his comedies and his tragedies to suggest to us that either pattern is a literary pattern. The world is not a perfect comedy, it's not a perfect tragedy. Somehow it's a mixture of both. I think that's one reason Shakespeare's realizing that was one reason he was such a genius at writing both comedy and tragedy. So we will see many of the same problems that we saw in the comedies now in King Lear, but taking them in a tragic direction. Now, I apologize for my romp through Hobbes and Rousseau last time. It was all too quick, but I am going to try to open up those ideas in going through King Lear, and they do supply an important background. Again, these modern thinkers, Hobbes and Rousseau, don't see society as natural to human beings. They see our natural state as apolitical. I think Shakespeare disagrees with that. And we've seen it in his approach to politics. Now, in King Lear, we're going to be really looking at the relationship between politics and human nature. And in that sense, it's a culmination of everything we've looked at. As I've stressed it many times, Shakespeare sees politics as one of the arenas in human life where human beings fulfill themselves, so that they cannot develop their nature to its fullest without the option of politics. So that Shakespeare would say, if you want to look at what a human being is, you have to look at Henry V. You have to look at Julius Caesar. You have to look at King Lear. These characters, through politics, develop aspects of humanity that would otherwise be undeveloped. So this is that line of thinking that I associate with Aristotle. that to understand the nature of a thing, you can't look at the average example of it. You can't look at its primitive beginnings. You have to look at its full development. Now, it used to be, I could illustrate this easily from popular culture with a film called Crocodile Dundee, 1986. Any of you have even heard of Crocodile Dundee? All right, well, I won't try to explain the plot, but Paul Hogan plays some guy from the Australian outback, and he shows up in Manhattan, and a mugger approaches him and pulls a knife on him. And it's a regular sort of street, New York street knife, a switchblade. And then Crocodile Dundee pulls out this enormous Bowie knife, this hunting knife. And the dialogue, I just checked it, the actual dialogue in the film is seeing this pitiful New York street knife. The Australian outback guy says, "That's not a knife," and then pulls out this huge Bowie knife and says, "That's a knife." Now, it's very Aristotelian, that to understand knifiness, you can't look at just any old knife. You can't look at something that pares apples. You got to look at a real He-Man's knife that could take apart any street crook in New York. Now, it is very interesting. Looking this up, I misremembered the lines, and evidently everybody does. The way you Google it is, you call that a knife, this is a knife. Not as in the film, that's not a knife, that's a knife. Now, it shows, I'm so glad to see that the whole world has made this mistake, because the common formulation, and evidently there's some heavy metal Australian band that has a song called that, you call that a knife, this is a knife. That's the full Aristotelian approach. You call that a knife? You can't define knives by just any ordinary knife. This is a knife. Now, Shakespeare takes the same view of human beings. This is the very end of Julius Caesar. Some of you guys may remember these lines, very famous lines. Antony's concluding tribute to Brutus. "This was the noblest Roman of them all. All the conspirators, save only he, did that they did in envy of great Caesar. He only in a general honest thought and common good to all made one of them. His life was gentle, and the elements so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say to all the world, 'This was a man.'" There it is. This is a knife. This is a man. And notice nature might stand up. So to understand human nature for Mark Antony, you got to look at the noblest Roman of them all. And that's why I'm saying Shakespeare's Aristotelian in this respect, and why politics is so important to him. Because to understand the perfection of humanity, you have to look at how human nature manifests itself in politics. At the same time, though, and this is where you get the tragedy in Shakespeare, politics is not everything. And not all human possibilities can be revealed in political life and in the communal world. There are things in human nature that go beyond politics. And therefore he explores, for example, the tragic love of Romeo and Juliet. And we'll be now seeing this in King Lear. As I've said many times, his plays are about the politics, but also about the limits of politics. Human nature fulfills itself in political life, but it also is often frustrated in political life. It often feels dammed up, thwarted in its goals, and that's the tragic business that Shakespeare explores in King Lear. So let's plunge right into the middle of King Lear and set up what I think are its fundamental issues. So if you'll turn to page 79, this is Act 3, Scene 4, about line 102. This is after Lear has gone crazy. He's in the middle of the heath, having been driven out by his evil daughters, and he's looking at a figure he thinks is a naked beggar named Tom of Bedlam. And Tom of Bedlam makes quite an impression on King Lear. Thou art better in a grave than to answer with thy uncovered body this extremity of the skies. Is man no more than this? And there's the question. What is the nature of man? And it's at the very center here, Act 3, Scene 4 of King Lear. Consider him well. Knowest the worm no silk, the beast no hide, the sheep no wool, the cat no perfume. Ha! Here's three of us are sophisticated. Thou art the thing itself. Unaccommodated man is no more but a poor, bare, forked animal as thou art. Off, you lendings. So there's Rousseau. It's just unbelievable that Shakespeare anticipates Rousseau's second discourse and Rousseau's idea of the natural man. That natural man would be an orangutan. Natural man would be just a beast. The thing itself, unaccommodated man. To get at the nature of man here, King Lear thinks you have to reduce man to his barest essentials. And above all, that means take off his clothes. That's just conventional stuff that comes with civilization, clothing. King Lear is really struck by the nakedness of poor Tom here. And to get at human nature, you would take away all sophistication and end up with this poor, bare, forked animal. It even sounds like Hobbes' characterization of the state of nature, nasty, poor, solitary, brutish, and short. And so Lear starts taking off his clothing. This is the central movement of the play. Get back to nature by rejecting all of civilization as merely conventional. And this is an important movement in the play, and it is echoed elsewhere. By Gloucester, for example. Page 96. This is Act 4, Scene 1, about line 33. In the last night's storm, he's also looking at Tom of Bedlam. In the last night's storm, I such a fellow saw, which made me think a man a worm. Same notion, a man a worm. So there is a very strong movement in this play to say, is man no more than this? That we are no more than animals. That a man without a city is a beast, to use Aristotle's terms. And many people have identified this as the message of King Lear. Particularly in the 50s, there were all these readings of King Lear as if it had been written by Samuel Beckett. It was seen in the context of the theater of the absurd. The Peter Brook film of King Lear is based on this reading of the play. Many people have seen this play as deeply nihilistic, as revealing that human beings are no more than beasts. And certainly it opens up that abyss and invites us to peer into it. But we have to look at the whole play. And if you turn to page 144, this is Act 5, Scene 3, about line 307. King Lear, thinking of Cordelia, says, why should a dog, a horse, a rat have life, and thou no breath at all? It's at least worth considering that in his dying words, King Lear appears to repudiate what he claimed in Act 3, Scene 4. Here he suggests that man is more than a beast, because his daughter Cordelia, her life was worth much more than that of a dog, a horse, a rat. I ask you from the beginning to think of this as a complicating factor in thinking about the play. And if you'll turn back to page 65, which is Act 2, Scene 4, line 265, King Lear at another moment says, allow not nature more than nature needs. Man's life is cheap as beasts. As if at that moment he is rejecting the idea that man is just an animal. And I do want to run, I'll be spending 3 lectures running through the complexity of this issue in Shakespeare. But if we go back to page 79 in Act 3, Scene 4, let me point out something else. King Lear asks of poor Tom of Bedlam, is man no more than this? Well, I've got news for King Lear. Man is more than this, Because this is not poor Tom of Bedlam. This is Edgar, future Duke of Gloucester and possible King of England. Lear is actually taken in by a disguise at this moment. When he thinks he's seeing the thing itself, he's actually seeing a disguise that we know Edgar has put on to protect himself now that he's been outlawed. On some simple level, man is more than this. This seeming reductio ad absurdum of human nature is really a very sophisticated figure from the court who's going to emerge as very important towards the end of the play. Shakespeare often does this in this play, offering us a sense that the characters are mistaken. They're saying fabulously fascinating things, and we're so tempted to say, oh yeah, man is no more than this. But Shakespeare is reminding us man is. And then just 2 pages later, so still Act 3, Scene 4, line 157, suddenly Tom of Bedlam undergoes a metamorphosis. As Lear says, first let me talk with this philosopher. What is the cause of thunder? We'll come back to this scene and analyze it in great detail next time, but do understand that this figure of Edgar has split into Tom of Bedlam and this philosopher. And we are seeing, as we do throughout Act 3, the bestial side of humanity once the political order dissolves. But something else opens up, too. And it's not something insignificant that Shakespeare associates it with philosophy. Indeed, in this scene, Shakespeare brings about the dream of Plato's Republic, a conversation between a king and a philosopher. Just Plato has Socrates say in the Republic, the human evils will not cease until this happens, that kings can talk to philosophers. And that's what we see here. King Lear talking to a philosopher. In other words, man is more than a beast. We see his higher potentialities in this scene as well, the potentiality for philosophy. And by the next page, page 82, about line 188, Lear is referring to this figure as a good Athenian, an Athenian philosopher, therefore Socrates. So remember I said about Aristotle, if you ask Aristotle what is a man, he's going to want to point you to Socrates, not to an orangutan, but in Aristotle's view, the most highly developed human being, which would be the philosopher. Now, Shakespeare is merciless. We do not hear the dialogue between the king and the philosopher in the scene. Lear and Tom withdraw backstage, and we hear some trivial stuff from Gloucester and Kent. But maybe the whole play is actually the dialogue between a philosopher and a king that Shakespeare only hints at in the scene. In any case, I want to open up the whole play for you from the very beginning here. That at the center of this play is a scene that asks the question, what is man? And first offers the answer that man is no better than a beast, but then offers the possibility that man is a philosopher. And we'll see this repeated in the 4th act as well, these 2 options. And it is the great confrontation between Hobbes, Rousseau on one side and Plato, Aristotle on the other. That is, do you understand human nature from the lowest perspective, from our origins, from our barest beginnings? Would you look at human nature by looking at an orangutan, or do you understand human nature from the highest perspective in terms of our goals, what we can develop into at our highest, what the fullest flowering of human nature might be? The center of this play is an astounding confrontation between ancient and modern philosophy in that sense. And I don't quite know how Shakespeare could have foreseen what was coming in Hobbes and Locke. I think he probably saw enough in Machiavelli to anticipate the direction that was going. So do you understand human nature in terms of its beginnings or its ends? in terms of its lowest common denominator or its perfection. I'm going to say that that argument runs throughout King Lear. So again, I apologize for jumping ahead, but I'm trying to give you a sense of what's most fully at stake in this play. All right, now let's turn to analyzing King Lear in some detail. And here we're going to have to spend a lot of time on the beginning and understanding King Lear's plan. Because it's very important to understand from the beginning that King Lear is not an idiot. He's not a senile old man. Many people within the play, including his nasty, nasty daughters, think he is, and many critics think he is as well. I would like to point out that when Shakespeare wants to portray a senile man, he can do it. Look at page 125. This is Act 4, Scene 7, about line 60. King Lear saying, "I'm a very foolish, fond old man, 80 and upward, not an hour more nor less, and to deal plainly, I fear I am not in my perfect mind. Methinks I should know you and know this man, yet I am doubtful. For I'm mainly ignorant what place this is, and all the skill I have remembers not these garments." That is a weak, terribly old man who has been through a lot. But that's not the King Lear we meet at the beginning of this play. Here's the voice of that king. Page 4, Act 1, Scene 1, line 38. "Meantime, we shall express our darker purpose. Give me the map there. Know that we have divided in 3 our kingdom, and 'tis our fast intent to shake all cares and business from our age, conferring them on younger strengths, while we, unburdened, crawl towards death. Our son of Cornwall, and you are no less loving son of Albany, we have this hour a constant will to publish our daughter's several dowers, that future strife may be prevented now." This is not the voice of a senile old man. This is the voice of someone who has been commanding all his life and is still in command. Page 7. Line 111, "For by the sacred radiance of the sun, the mysteries of Hecate in the night, by all the operations of the orbs from whom we do exist and cease to be, here I disclaim all my paternal care, propinquity and property of blood, and as a stranger to my heart and me, hold thee from this forever, the barbarous Scythian, or he that makes his generation messes to gorgeous appetite, shall to my bosom be as well neighbored, pitied, and relieved as thou, my sometime daughter." We really need Gandalf here. You gotta have a voice like Ian McKellen. And great King Lears have to have great voices. He is so much in command at the beginning of the play. He's not senile. And his plan is not simply a mistake. The plan he comes up with on the spur of the moment in Act 1, Scene 1 is a mistake. But it's not the original plan. The original plan had problems, but it was not simply a mistake. It's arguable it was a great attempt to solve a very difficult political problem. And so we really, the way many people treat this scene, you would think Lear is pitiful, not a tragic hero. Now here I'm going to turn to Marxist criticism. I've been having a course on Shakespeare and politics. We haven't had any Marxist criticism. Unfortunately for any of you radicals out there, it's going to be Groucho Marx, not Karl Marx. You guys know who Groucho Marx was? Good, all right. Good. If you ever want to understand politics, see the movie Duck Soup. One of the greatest representations of how politics works. Anyway, you won't believe this, but T.S. Eliot was a great... Anybody know who T.S. Eliot was? Now, T.S. Eliot was a great fan of the Marx Brothers. And quite improbably, T.S. Eliot and Groucho Marx started corresponding, and eventually T.S. Eliot invited Groucho to have dinner with him. And Groucho felt he had to prepare for this meeting, a meeting almost as titanic as Lear's with Tom of Bedlam's. And so he prepared a speech on King Lear. This is so hilarious. He was going to meet T.S. Eliot, so he had to say something about King Lear. And in a letter to Gummo, the most obscure of the Marx Brothers, Groucho wrote, reporting his conversation to T.S. Eliot, I said the king was an incredibly foolish old man, which God knows he was. And that if he'd been my father, I would have run away from home at the age of 8 instead of waiting until I was 10. I pointed out that King Lear's opening speech was the height of idiocy. Imagine, I said, a father asking his 3 children, which of you kids loves me most? Groucho actually speaks for a lot of literary critics there in saying that Lear's just mistaken in the opening scene. People have said this is just an old fairy tale beginning. We just have to accept it. But all of that misses the fact that Lear had an original plan. And Shakespeare is very careful to distinguish it from the one we see him carrying out in Act 1. Now, we should be prepared for this. We've seen this several times in this course. In Richard II, we began with a grand public scene, pageant-like, ceremonial, and only afterwards did we learn what was going on behind the scenes. And there was a lot of machinations going on, and we understood what the real source of the animosity between Bolingbroke and Mowbray was. Even more to the point, in Henry V, we see before the grand public scene in Act 1, a kind of backroom bargaining scene. We're going to get a grand public presentation of Henry asking the church without bias to tell him whether he has the right to the French throne or not. We learn in a scene prior to it this is all prearranged, that Henry's made a deal with the church. So we should be very careful in King Lear to look at the very opening and what it tells us about the grand public scene that follows. And here's the opening. So this is page 3, Act 1, Scene 1, line 1. This is Kent and Gloucester talking in prose in private. I thought the king had more affected the Duke of Albany than Cornwall. It always seemed so to us, but now in the division of the kingdom, it appears not which of the dukes he values most. For equalities are so weighed that curiosity in neither can make choice of either's moiety. Now what this tells us is the deal is done. It prepares us to understand that what's happening in the second scene is mere show. The whole love test is just a show. It's a diversion. In fact, Lear has divided the kingdom already. He comes in with maps actually prepared to show how the kingdom's divided. And moreover, what we learn, well, first of all, we know that Kent and Gloucester are in agreement with this plan. Because in the next scene, when Kent doesn't like the new plan, he starts berating Lear about it and telling him it's wrong. He does that in public where he gets himself banished. Here he's in private where there's no penalty for his expressing his opinion, and he and Gloucester are not questioning this plan at all. Presumably they've been on the planning. And what they notice about it is the even-handedness of it. Indeed, they know that Lear prefers the Duke of Albany to the Duke of Cornwall. Lear is no idiot. He knows these dukes. He knows Albany's the good one and Cornwall's the evil one. Maybe he doesn't know yet that Cornwall is pluck out Gloucester's eyes evil. But he knew the difference, and he's ignoring it. The charge against the second plan is that it's done in anger and in haste, and that it's a manifestation of Lear's personal feelings and not what's good for the kingdom. Presumably the first plan was not that way. It seems to have been arrived at in consultation with his counselors, and they've signed off on this thing already. Now, as we'll see, there are so many details of the play that point us to understanding this, and nobody did for centuries. You get a few hints in 19th century criticism that people understand there are two plans. But the first person ever to work out Lear's first plan in detail that I know of is a man named Harry Jaffa. Alas, he just died this past January, but he wasn't 95 at the time. And he wrote an essay called The Limits of Politics, King Lear. I actually checked, you can find it online. It's right there online. It appears in a book edited by Alan Bloom called Shakespeare's Politics. I should say that my whole approach to Shakespeare grows out of the work of Bloom and Jaffa. So if you're interested in studying this stuff a little more, your first place to start would be Alan Bloom's Shakespeare's Politics, which has essays in it on Julius Caesar and Merchant of Venice and Othello, and also has Jaffa's great article on King Lear. So much of what I'm going to say now is going to be developed out of Jaffa's article. Just to point to one more thing that kind of nails this whole thing down and makes you wonder how no one could have seen this before Jaffa. Look at the bottom of page 10. So this is Act 1, Scene 1, line 195. At this moment, Lear is called in, Duke of Burgundy, the King of France, about Cordelia's marriage, and he asked Lear asked Burgundy, what'll it take for you to marry her? And he says, Most Royal Majesty, I crave no more than hath your highness offered, nor will you tender less. So it is a done deal, and Burgundy knows about it. Everyone is in on the deal except literary critics. Burgundy knows what he's going to get ahead of time, and he's evidently the one that's going to marry Cordelia. Page 12, line 244, Royal King, give but that portion which you yourself proposed, and here I take Cordelia by the hand, Duchess of Burgundy. So you see, the illusion in the second scene is that everything's up for grabs. That Lear is going to divide up the kingdom according to the speeches of love offered by his daughters. But no, he's divided up the kingdom already. He knows where everything's going. He's just staging this love test, why we'll get to it in a moment, to in effect ratify it. But ahead of time, Gloucester and Kent know what's going on. Burgundy knows what's going on. So what is going on? Well, you have to start from the fact that Lear has a real problem in the issue of succession. And like Shakespeare, he understands that almost the first thing we learned about kingship from Shakespeare, succession is the problem. It's too much the luck of the draw just to hand it over the kingdom to the first in line of succession. Now, Lear's situation is particularly complicated by the fact that he has no sons. But presumably, and we're not accepting the Salic law here, presumably the kingdom should go to Goneril. Goneril is his eldest daughter, and primogeniture is a very basic rule of kingship, as we've seen. So if Lear does nothing, presumably the kingdom goes to Goneril. Lear knows that's not right. And again, this notion that he's somehow blind to what's going on in this first scene is just the opposite. He knows exactly what's going on, and his problem is that Goneril is going to inherit the kingdom if he doesn't do anything about it. So he contrives a very interesting plan. Now, he's been very cagey about all this. One thing he's going to do is supervise the succession. He's not going to wait to die and then just let it happen. By this turning over power but keeping the name of king, he expects to arbitrate for a while longer and see that the solution he's creating really works. Now, again, what he's doing is something really out of the ordinary here. The conventional, ordinary thing would be just die and let the kingdom go to Goneril. He knows that's not right. So first thing, he will be there to supervise the succession. He's been very cagey. He's not published a dowry yet for his two married daughters, Goneril and Regan, so that the Dukes of Albany and Cornwall don't know quite what they're going to get. Well, what Lear's plan is to give them what they've already got and nothing more. Albany is a territory in the north of Britain, on the borders of Scotland, and Cornwall is the southwest of England. In effect, now we don't see the maps, but in effect, what Lear is planning on doing is giving Goneril and Albany the lands that they already preside over in their dukedom, and same for Goneril, Regan and Cornwall in the north. And then he's going to give Cordelia the best part of the kingdom, the center of the kingdom. And indeed, when she steps up to the plate, he doesn't mince words. What he says to her is, what can you say to draw a third more opulent than these? This is, page 6, Act 1, Scene 1, line 88. What can you say to draw a third more opulent than your sisters? He loves her most. He knows she's the best of the three daughters. Now, again, he may not know what depths of evil lurk in the bosoms of Goneril and Regan, for reasons we'll discuss in a minute. But he knows that Cordelia is the one that he loves the most, and he's the one, this is page 8, line 125, I loved her most and thought to set my rest on her kind nursery. The original plan was effectively give Goneril and Regan and their husbands what they have already, give Cordelia the central part of the kingdom, and live with her. That will give her a real extra power in this relationship. Cornwall and Albany will be on the extremes of the kingdom. Cordelia will be in the middle. And what's more, he plans on giving her a foreign alliance. And that will be with the Duke of Burgundy. And again, Burgundy knows about it. This has already been negotiated. And this will give Cordelia extra power. She will not only have the central best part of the kingdom and her father living with her, but she will also have an important foreign alliance. But she will not marry the King of France. Now, what's the problem of marrying the King of France? Well, we read a whole bunch of history plays to see that you don't want the King of France to have a claim to the English throne. And we had in Henry V, an English king trying to marry a French princess. Here we'd have the reverse of that, a French king marrying an English princess, and which would give France a claim to the English throne. Burgundy was powerful, but not a kingdom. Now, we might also look back to Henry V to give us guidance here. I had never thought of this for many years, and then I realized that scene at the beginning of Act 5 of Henry V is a very important clue to King Lear, because what we see there is Burgundy acting as the negotiator between England and France. And the sense there that Burgundy was very important in the relations between France and Britain. I must say, for years, starting the play, I associate Burgundy only with very, very fine French wine. Quite rightly so. It took me a while to learn that by Shakespeare's lifetime, the Duchy of Burgundy had been absorbed into the French kingdom. But for centuries prior to that, Burgundy had been an independent political unit and one of the most powerful in Europe, because Burgundy was one of the richest communities in Europe. At that time, we're talking 14th and 15th centuries, it encompassed what's now Belgium and the Netherlands, and was the center of the European textile industry. Places like Bruges and Ghent, and it was incredibly wealthy. So much so that the Habsburgs married into the family, and the French king coveted it, and so on. Eventually, Burgundy was absorbed into France, and the Netherlands, the lowlands, what's now Belgium and the Netherlands, went to the Habsburgs. In any case, though, for much of the late Middle Ages, Burgundy was a very powerful force in Europe. And just what Lear would have wanted. France is in between Britain and Burgundy. Burgundy is a little distant. Burgundy is never going to rule England. France might. The Duke of Burgundy can't lay claim to the kingship of England. The King of France can. Again, Jaffa works most of this out in his article. This is a really savvy plan that Lear has. So he can't just get up and announce, I'm making Cordelia my heir. Screw you, Goneril Regan, you're out of the picture. He has no right to do that, no basis on which he can do it, and he'd immediately antagonize the Dukes of Albany and Cornwall, who are quite powerful. He figures out the best he can settle for is dividing up the kingdom, giving Cordelia the best part in the middle, allying her with a foreign power that will give her greater strength, but will not allow England to come under the sway of a foreign power. So it's, again, maybe this plan would have failed. We see indeed in Shakespeare's plays the best laid plans of kings gang aft agley. Things often go wrong in the king's plan, as you can see in the life of Henry V. Still, it was not the plan of an idiot or a senile old man. It's carefully thought out, and again, well negotiated. The major counselors, Kent and Gloucester, have signed on. Duke of Burgundy has agreed. France is there because there's a lot at stake, and you never know what's going to happen, as does happen in the first scene. So why the love test? Why doesn't Lear just come out and announce, I've consulted with Henry Kissinger, and I've come up with this balance of power plan to preserve the peace in future years? Well, the problem with that is there's no conventional justification for that. What he's trying to do is utterly unconventional. It's an attempt to solve a legitimate political problem, but there's no way of justifying it in conventional political terms. Again, the overwhelmingly conventional thing to do would be Goneril inherits the whole kingdom, or else just leave it up to war. So Lear comes up with really a rather brilliant plan. I'm going to make it seem like a love test. This very political plan will be disguised as a family matter. I will come out here and I will say, I'm going to divide up the kingdom according to how much my daughters love me, and this is their big chance. And the wonderful thing about that is that if he can present it that way, then he's trapped Goneril and Regan, because they will have just professed all this love for him, and they cannot then turn around and say, you didn't give me enough. He gets them to say, oh, you mean everything to me, I would do anything for you. And then what are they going to say when they get these portions? Now, remember, they don't know what's going on, Goneril and Regan. When Goneril steps up to the plate, she doesn't know what's at stake. She has to wonder, well, how much? If I say enough, will I get the whole kingdom? By the way, Trevor Nunn's one of the few directors I know who emphasizes that, shows Goneril shocked when she hears Lear's plan, and indeed eager to go for it all. Now, when Regan steps up, she might be already a little suspicious. Gee, Goneril just got Albany. She had that already. Am I going to just get Cornwall? But she can't know that. She still has to wonder, well, if I just up the rhetoric a little more, maybe I'll get London. Maybe I'll get the center of the kingdom. Only Cordelia comes up to the plate with it crystal clear what's happened. There's only one part of the kingdom left. And Lear says, what can you say to draw a third more opulent than your sisters? He's just set it up for her there. And again, Goneril and Regan could not complain if Cordelia got the best of the kingdom. All she had to say was, whatever my sisters said, I double it. And then Lear can say, aha, you see, she loves me the most. She's in the ideal position. Number 3. She can raise the ante all she wants. Now, Now, it's interesting, there's a source, one of the sources for King Lear is a play called The Chronicle History of King Lear. You have very brief excerpts from in the Signet edition. It's rather interesting to compare it for example, in this source, which, by the way, was a very popular play, though it's terrible, but it was very popular. Shakespeare undoubtedly knew it, and his audience probably knew it. So these comparisons are interesting. In the source, a counselor rats out King Lear and tells Goneril and Regan what's going to happen. In the source, they know what's going on, and they prepare these wonderful speeches because they know it's going to be a love test. But what's really interesting in the source, in this Chronicle History of King Lear, is it explains the trap. It explains why you would want to get these daughters to commit to these big love speeches for Lear's political reasons. Now, in the source, none of the daughters are married yet. They're all going to be married on this occasion. And Lear wants to marry Cordelia to the King of Ireland. And she evidently doesn't want to be married to the Hibernian king, as he's called in the play. And this is what Lear says to his counselors, explaining what he's going to do. Then at the vantage will I take Cordelia, even as she doth protest she loves me best. I'll say then, daughter, grant me one request, to show thou lovest me as thy sisters do. Except a husband whom myself will woo. This said, she cannot deny my suit, although, poor soul, her senses will be mute. Then will I triumph in my policy and match her with a king of Brittany, later called the Hibernian king. So in the source, Lear explains the trap. Get the daughter to say how much she loves you, and then say, okay, if you love me that much, you'll surely do me this little favor of marrying this man you don't want to marry, but I want you to marry. And Goneril says something similar. Once she and Regan have found out what's going to happen, they plan out the whole course, and they know they can back Cordelia into a corner. Goneril says, I smile to think in what a woeful plight Cordelia will be when we answer thus, for she will rather die than give consent to join in marriage with the Irish king. Now again, I offer this in the source. It's clear what the strategy is. Get a public declaration of love, and then you've got whatever daughter backed into a corner. In the case of Shakespeare's King Lear, Goneril and Regan will have to accept the settlement. They can't. Lear has taken it out of the realm of politics and made it a family matter. It's just between me and my daughters. This has nothing to do with political considerations. Now, in fact, it has everything to do with political considerations. And again, if Jaffe's right, this is a very careful political plan. But it can't work if the politics of it is transparent. We've heard that argument many times, that if you lay on the table the politics of it, then it becomes a matter of political dispute. If you're crafting this plan, then the same thing will happen that happened with Glendower and Hotspur in Henry IV. Oh, I'm not getting enough. Look how that river cuts off my territory. I want this, I want that. It would open the whole thing up to negotiation. Instead, Lear makes the whole thing seem to transcend the world of politics as a matter of love. And therefore, you can't quibble about it. Love is not open for negotiation. Now, again, I can't say for sure that this plan would have worked. But it has some chance of working. And in any case, is not the product of someone simply senile or stupid. And what's at stake here is whether King Lear is a tragic hero or not. If he's a senile old man at the beginning of the play, he's pathetic. If he is just blundering, then he's pathetic. There's nothing great about it. I love the Jaffe thesis because it suggests something heroic about King Lear from the beginning. Here's this great king towards the end of a very grand rule, and he's trying to solve a genuine political problem and preserve most of his achievement through a very cagey plan here. It means that the tragedy grows out of some greatness in King Lear and not some failing. And it also grows out of a greatness in Cordelia. And this way we get a tragedy, because what happens, this is page 6, so Act 1, Scene 1, again about line 85, when Lear says, "What can you say to draw a third more opponent than your sisters speak?" And Cordelia says, "Nothing, my lord." And you have to try to appreciate what an insult that is to Lear on so many different levels. This is the court. Lear is asking her to play along with this scheme of his. By now, she should at least have an inkling of his love for her, that this whole plan is a tribute to his love for her, that he's offering her everything or as much as he can and trying to do the best for her. "Nothing, my lord," she says. "Nothing?" Lear asks. "Nothing. Nothing will come of nothing." Speak again. "Unhappy that I am, I cannot heave my heart into my mouth. I love your majesty according to my bond, no more nor less." And Lear is patient. He tries to keep making this work, even though this is already an insult to him. "How now, Cordelia, mend your speech a little, lest you may mar your fortunes. Good my lord, you have begot me, bred me, loved me. I return these duties back as our right fit. Obey you, love you, and most honor you. Why have my sisters husbands, if they say they love you all? Haply, when I shall wed, that lord whose hand must take my plight shall carry half my love with him, half my care and duty. Sure, I shall never marry like my sisters, to love my father all. But goes thy heart with this? I, my good lord, so young and so untender, so young, my lord, and true, let it be so, thy truth then be thy dower." And here we see the central confrontation in the play between power and truth. Lear is making a power play in this first scene. It's all about power. It's all about transferring power to the next generation, and especially to Cordelia. Cordelia has other values in mind, we would say, and to her, truth is the primary value. She would rather have truth on her side than power. There's no question that Lear's plan involves a deception. And indeed, at this point, he would have successfully deceived Goneril and Regan. That's what politics is. I mean, politics involves a lot of deception. As in this case, covering over what is a very political solution with the illusion that it's all a family matter, much as Henry V is doing at the end of his play, where he's presenting the takeover of France as a matter of love. I love this princess so much, I will take over all of France. This is what's involved in politics. Often you have to lie in politics, or perhaps not tell the whole truth. Cordelia is in effect saying you have to tell the whole truth. What upsets her is the hypocrisy of her sisters. She knows they're lying. Indeed, she feels that Lear's whole plan has called upon everyone to lie here and to flatter him. Now, I don't want to belittle the personal aspect of this. I have no doubt that Lear is hope to enjoy this moment. I believe the love test is a carefully calculated political move, but it doesn't hurt, in Lear's view, that he'll get these wonderful professions of love from his daughters. And above all, that the daughter he loves most will tell him that she loves him most. And it'll be a kind of love fest between Lear and Cordelia. I believe that his emotional investment in the scene is the source of his enormous anger in this scene. That Cordelia thwarts his loving expectations of her, also, though, thwarts his whole plan. she, in effect, exposes the hypocrisy of it. She effectively calls Goneril and Regan liars, which they are, but you've got to accept a lot of lying in politics. It's part of the game if you're going to play it. And of course, you see here, as is so true in the play, she embraces the value of truth. Now, I say this so that Cordelia is a tragic figure. Because again, most people like to say she's just a victim. And she's this wonderful, delicate woman, and she is destroyed. And anytime you say that she has a part in the tragedy, you get accused of saying, oh, so you think it's right that she was hanged at the end. I said, no, I don't think it was right that she was hanged at the end. Nevertheless, I think for us to think of her as a tragic figure, she must have some agency in the play. Things must follow from decisions she makes, and indeed she is a heroic figure. And indeed, look at what Lear says on page 8, so Act 1, Scene 1, line 131, let pride, which she calls plainness. Lear is aware that she is her father's daughter. Lear, as we'll be seeing, is so characterized by his pride, by his thumos, by his capacity for what he calls noble anger. But Cordelia has that too. She has great pride in her truthfulness, and she refuses to lie. She refuses to say anything that might be tainted with hypocrisy. And you see, this is this problem we've seen with love. We've seen in romantic love, and here it's familial love. Love can be tainted by mercenary considerations. Why is this scene so annoying to Cordelia? Because it's inviting the daughters to confuse real love with opportunism. You know, how can you judge whether someone really loves you if what's at stake is how much you're going to give them? It, in effect, impeaches the love from the beginning. So you can say that both Lear and Cordelia make a tragic choice in the Hegelian sense in this opening scene. That Lear chooses politics over truth, and Cordelia chooses truth over politics. And in a way, the central conflict, the Hegelian tragic conflict in this play, is between truth and politics. We see in this play, we've been seeing this all along since the history plays, but most tragically realized in this play, the tension between truth and politics. We see that Lear's political plan, as brilliant as it may be, requires deception, not incidentally, but in its very nature. Because his goal is to trap Goneril and Regan. And moreover, we see the whole problem that we have been seeing since Richard II, the king's access to truth. The king is surrounded by flatterers. And he's surrounded by flatterers because so much is at stake. People will not tell him the truth. Because if they tell him what he wants to hear, even if it's not the truth, then he will reward them. And we see in the case of Kent, when he does tell Lear the truth, he is banished for it. Lear is, I believe, a great king in Shakespeare's view. We see him as an image of a great king who presides at the end of a long career over a unified Britain and is trying to come up with a way of preserving his political legacy. He is a great king. People like Kent worship him, follow him wherever he goes, and yet Lear is so cut off from truth because of this problem of flattery, which we'll see come up again and again in the play. And he is surrounded, his fool tries to tell him the truth. And look what happens with him. Page 28, this is Act 1, Scene 4. So at line 110, the fool says, if I gave them all my living, I'd keep my coxcombs myself. There's mine, beg another of their daughters. And Lear says, take heed, sirrah, the whip. This all-licensed fool, as we see him called, is made to, he has the license, the freedom to tell the king the truth. Even he, though, is threatened with punishment. And as he says, line 114, truce a dog must to kennel, he must be whipped out when Lady the Bratch may stand by the fire and stink. It's the problem we've been seeing in the courts all along for Shakespeare, that flattery prevails and truth is banished. Page 30, line 182, the fool says, prithee, nuncle, keep a schoolmaster that can teach thy fool to lie. I would fain learn to lie. That's the fool's way of saying, I would fain learn to be political. And Lear says, and you lie, sirrah, we'll have you whipped. And the fool answers, I marvel what kin thou and thy daughters are. They'll have me whipped for speaking truth. Thou'lt have me whipped for lying, and sometimes I'm whipped for holding my peace. That is the problem of truth-tellers in the world of politics. They're punished if they lie, they're punished if they tell the truth, and they're punished if they don't speak at all, because not to speak is to speak in political circumstances. We saw this with Prince Hal, how he felt that he had to flee the court to get away from the liars and the flatterers here. But in the case of Lear, he has never been out of the court. He lives in the court. And if you turn to page 114, again to jump ahead, you will see that one of his great lessons, this is Act 4, Scene 6. We will be looking over the next two lectures at all the things Lear learns from his experience. But this is one of them. This is Act 4, Scene 6, about line 96. They flattered me like a dog, that is to say, the way dogs do, and told me I had white hairs in my beard ere the black ones were there, telling me I was wise when I really wasn't. To say aye and no to everything that I said, aye and no, too, was no good divinity. When the rain came to wet me once, and the wind to make me chatter, when the thunder would not peace at my bidding, there I found 'em, there I smelt 'em out. Go to! They are not men of their words. They told me I was everything. 'Tis a lie. I am not ague-proof. This is the realization that Henry V came to. In a way, Richard II as well. What has taught these kings who they are in Shakespeare is their bodies. They have had to learn that they are not these great gods, that they're puffed up to be as kings, that they are just human beings, and they realize that when they realize that they just have ordinary human bodies and they suffer pain and they suffer illness the way other people do. Remember when Richard II says that in Act 5, and when Henry V comes to this realization in Act 4, I pointed out that what's unusual about Henry V is that he can understand this without being kicked out of power. Lear, like Richard II, has to be kicked out of power for him to come to understand his limitations as a human being, that the king is but a man, as Henry V puts it. And again, we'll talk about this reduction to the level of the body next time. But what I'm trying to show you how fundamental to the play this whole issue of flattery is, which we've been seeing ever since Richard II's court. Lear, in anger, in shock at Cordelia not going along with what he thought was his greatest expression of love for her, as well as the proper political plan for the future of Britain and the future of Cordelia. In shock, he comes up on the spur of the moment with a really, really bad plan. Again, the original plan might have failed, but it has a kind of Bismarckian, Kissingerian balance of power type thinking to it. But the second plan is a formula for disaster. Split up the kingdom into two halves. The three-part plan is a plan for balance of power. The two-part plan, almost inevitably wars between Albany and Cornwall, and indeed very early in the play, we hear about potential wars between Albany and Cornwall as if they're just chomping at a bit to go at each other and to vie for having the whole kingdom. And moreover, Lear places himself at the mercy of his daughters, Goneril and Regan. Now, why does he do this? It's interesting to examine what his thinking must be so that we see what the nature of his mistake is and what it tells us about kingship. Lear's assumption is that the power of a father is more fundamental than the power of a king. That his family position will maintain the political equilibrium. That yes, even though he's kept only the name of a king, and essentially the armies are now in the hands of Cornwall and Albany, that Lear will still be able to rule by ruling through his daughters. Because he is their father, he can control them, and through them, he can control Cornwall and Albany. And now, Lear has every reason to think that the power of a father outweighs political power or outweighs any power, because Lear has been unchallenged in his power as a father, because he is, in fact, at the same time king. Every decision Lear ever made as father was automatically backed up by his power as king, because he was the king. Now, every other father in the kingdom knows this is not true, that their power ultimately must be backed up by political authority. What does Gloucester do when he begins to believe that his son Edgar is plotting against him? He says, I'll use the authority of the Duke of Cornwall to outlaw my son. Normally, fathers have to appeal to political authorities to uphold their authority. That's what politics is there for, to arbitrate problems in the family and to, in these kinds of regimes, to stand up for the power of the fathers. Lear never had to appeal to political authority because he embodied it. You can imagine what an imposing figure this guy was to his children. He's pretty imposing to everybody. And he is their father. But beyond that, he's king, and everything he ever said as father was automatically backed up by his authority as king. And indeed, his children had no one to appeal to. There's not even Mrs. Lear in the play. They can't even play off mommy against daddy in the family. So you can say, as king, Lear was uniquely poised to think that his authority as father was overwhelming and incontrovertible. This is, if you will, the occupational hazard of kingship here, or Shakespeare showing the tragic situation the king is in. It's not just that now and then kings make mistakes, or now and then kings are misinformed. It's something in the nature of kingship which cuts them off from the very truth they need to rule as kings. That the one person in the kingdom who's not in a position to tell the distinction between paternal and kingly authority is the king himself. And moreover, always this problem of the king being surrounded by flatterers and not having access to truth. And also we see here, Lear is so prone to anger. This is our ultimate man of thumos here. He's 80 years old. He must still be taking testosterone pills because this guy, needs anger management, and it's everything that makes him a king. It's why people respond to him. Notice how alert he is to, far from being senile, he's alert to everything going on around him. Why is my man in the stocks? Where's my dinner? Where are my nights? Why isn't this happening? He's constantly obsessed with his dignity. Rightly so as a great king. But all of this makes him precipitate. And again, in this key opening scene with Cordelia, he doesn't sit down and think things through. He lets his anger rule his judgment and comes up with this really lousy second plan after the first plan was so carefully thought out and vetted with his counselors. So what we see here happening in the first and second acts, is Lear gradually coming to understand the difference between being a king and a father, something he did not initially understand. So that on page 27, for example, when this is Act 1, Scene 4, line 81, when he's offended by this servant of Goneril's, Oswald, "Come you hither, sir." "Who am I, sir?" "My lady's father." No longer the king, he's my lady's father. And the notion is Goneril's got all the political power now, and he's just her father. Or if you look at page 58, again, his anger. Let's start at the bottom of 57, so Act 2, Scene 4, about line 93. "Vengeance," here's the thumos. He's just been told that Gloucester's making excuses for Cornwall while he's not showing him. "My dear lord, you know the fiery quality of the Duke, how unremovable fixed he is in his own course. Vengeance, plague, death, confusion. Fiery? What quality? Why, Gloucester. I'd speak with the Duke of Cornwall and his wife." "Well, my good lord, I have informed them so." "Inform them? Dost thou understand me, man?" "Aye, my good lord." "The king would speak with Cornwall. The dear father would with his daughter speak." Commands, tends, service. It's beginning to open up in his mind. There's a gap here between being king and being father. And being king is more important than being a father. Having the command of the troops is more important than having any kind of family loyalty here. And so what we see happening in the first two acts is this Lear beginning to learn his limitations here as a king and as a father. The start of the play, he's in control of everything. And rightly so. The whole implication is that he's been a good ruler and people are loyal to him. But once he turns over, especially the military power, to Cornwall and Albany, he's in trouble and starts to lose control. And that starts to break him down. What we see in him is this division between king and father being played out in emotional terms in the play. Now, this is a little more schematic than it should be, but I'll make it anyway for the sake of argument. That is, Lear is torn between two emotions in the first two acts, grief and anger. And he grieves as a parent, and he's angry as a king. Now, he's also angry as a parent. I don't want to deny that. But it's as a father that he feels tempted to weep. His response as a king is all in terms of his dignity and lack of regard for it from people around. And this is what starts to tear him apart, and this is what eventually drives him mad. This is something that Shakespeare added to the play. There was no madness in the original King Lear play or in any of Shakespeare's sources. And I think we'll talk next time about why Shakespeare makes Lear mad, but he also suggests why it happens. And it is this inner division. Look, for example, at page 35. This is Act 1, Scene 4, about line 300. "What's the matter, sir? I'll tell thee. Life and death. I'm ashamed that thou hast power to shake my manhood thus, that these hot tears which break from me before should make me worth them. Blast and fogs upon thee. The untented woundings of a father's curse pierce every sense about the old fond eyes. Beweep this cause again, I'll pluck you out." He is ashamed that his daughters are making him weep. As a father, he is weeping. He is grief-stricken about how his daughters are treating him. And again, although he preferred Cordelia to Goneril and Regan, there's every sign he did not know and had no reason to know how evil Goneril and Regan are. His regime was holding them in. He was preventing them and Cornwall from expressing their evil. Now that he sees it, it breaks his heart, but he's also ashamed that they can shake his manhood. And his hope is to regain his power. Line 315, thou shalt find that I'll resume the shape which thou dost think I have cast off forever. Some man who's used to power and certainly can't get used to being impotent here. And he keeps making threats about it. But it is what gradually drives him mad. It's very interesting. He knows he's going mad. It's part of his problem. Page 39, Act 1, Scene 5, about line 46. Oh, let me not be mad. Not mad, sweet heaven. Keep me in temper. I would not be mad. He understands what is driving him mad. And then it happens gradually. Page 65. This is Act 2, Scene 4, about line 267. But for true need, you heavens, give me that patience I need. You see me here, you gods, a poor old man, as full of grief as age, wretched in both. This is a very difficult recognition for this man of such great regal dignity. A poor old man as full of grief as age, wretched in both. If it be you that stirs these daughters' hearts against their father, fool me not so much to bear it tamely. Touch me with noble anger. And there it is, thumos, noble anger. His anger is connected with his nobility, with his kingship. And let not women's weapons, water drops, stain my man's cheeks. No, you unnatural hags, I will have such revenges on you both, that all the world shall. I will do such things, what they are yet I know not, but they shall be the terrors of the earth. You think I'll weep? No, I'll not weep. I have full cores of weeping, but this heart shall break into 100,000 flaws, or ere I'll weep, fool, I shall go mad. And that stage direction there, storm and tempest. This is the first time we hear the storm, and the storm in Lear's soul gets this corresponding storm in the heavens here, and the center of his madness will be the center of the storm in Act 3 here. But you see the whole process play out here in this speech. Lear torn in these directions, too conscious of his dignity as a king to let people see him weep in public, and yet feeling so overwhelmed with the need to weep. And again, just to finish up today on page 75 to 6, he explains this when he is going mad. This is Act 3, Scene 4, about line 12. The tempest in my mind from my senses take all feeling else, save what beats there. Filial ingratitude. Is it not as this mouth should tear this hand for lifting food to it, but I will punish home. See, again, part of him wants revenge, wants to punish, wants to continue his role as king, powerful king who punishes wrongdoing, but he's impotent now. No, I will weep no more, but in such a night to shut me out. Pour on, I will endure. In such a night as this, O Regan Goneril, your old kind father, whose frank heart gave all, oh, that way madness lies. Let me shun that, no more of that. Shakespeare really makes us watch this division open up in Lear between the grieving father and the king who still has such a deep sense of his dignity. The grieving father wants to weep in public. The indignant king is ashamed to weep in public, has never wept in public in his life, and wants to punish home and get his revenge on his daughters. This is what tears Lear's mind apart. The thumos working against his grief as a parent, and it produces his madness, and it turns out to be a kind of Platonic madness. Plato's Republic, when the philosopher goes up out of the cave and sees the idea of the good, that bright, shining idea of the good, when he comes back to the cave, he's blinded, and people think he's mad in the cave. His philosophical wisdom appears as madness, the people who never left the cave. Well, it's that philosophical wisdom that Shakespeare explores in the third and fourth acts, and that's what we'll turn to on Thursday. Again, the way we're scheduled, you got my email, I hope next day, 2 more lectures on Lear, 2 lectures on The Tempest, and then on April 30th we'll have that voluntary review session for those who want to come. But looks like we're going to finish up despite the efforts of the winter and the storms. Okay.